Hey guys, good to be here this week for the labs update. Good news on the session side, we have basically been continuing to work on push notifications. I was literally just come from testing the Huawei push notification stuff on a Huawei phone, which is kind of the last thing that we're waiting for to fix up before we release push notifications. Just to remind people, the Huawei builds will kind of be separated from the rest of the builds, so there'll be a build flavor. So if you specifically have a Huawei phone, then you can use the Huawei push notification service, but for Google phones and iOS phones, they'll be getting a different version completely. But we did want to support that. We know that there's a lot of users out there who have Huawei phones which may not have access to Google Play services, but still want to receive those regular push notifications. So we've been building that, but also we've been overhauling the push notification system altogether, so it's faster and more secure now. So those changes will all be going ahead soon. Once we finish up that Huawei stuff, we can go out live, and that's very close to being finished now. We have also been working on disappearing messages. Desktop and Android are working on that now, basically merging in disappearing messages into user config. That process is mostly complete, at least for legacy disappearing messages on Android now. So that's going to go to one of the other team members on Android. They're going to see if everything is working as expected for new disappearing messages. And then we shouldn't be far away from that being finished on Android. Desktop, we're kind of just starting that now, but all seems to be going well there too. And there's a few other miscellaneous tasks which are being worked on iOS and Android too at the current time, and desktop as well. Desktop's having like a whole build system replaced underneath it, so there'll be more news about that in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, that's essentially the session stuff. Also, user config obviously has enabled now. It's been enabled for a few weeks, and the reports seem to be pretty good. So yeah, that's session stuff. On the LokiNet side of things, we are now kind of solidly into implementing libquick into LokiNet. So we're starting to make a bit more progress on that. And there's a draft PR open now, which contains like the first parts of work for implementing libquick into LokiNet, and that's looking better and better as we move along. And on core, we are basically continuing our work on the BLS prototype that we're working on. This is basically the signature prototype where you can take a consensus of service nodes. They can, come to consensus on a particular event on the Oxen work chain. They're able to send this to the EVM chain for it to be validated. So that's really coming along now. We have the naive implementation done. It's pretty gas expensive, but we're going to introduce a new optimization in the next week or so, which should lead to much lower gas fees, even when the network expands to kind of normal size where you'd have like say 2,000 nodes signing something. So that's going really well. And one more thing on the session side, while it's kind of half Oxen core, half session, we have begun, or we've been working on for a couple of weeks now, the new closed group implementation in libsession. So Jason is working on that, and he's coming along quite nicely there, implementing one of the first types of messages. And once that's done, some of the session team will pivot into taking what's been done in libsession and implementing it into the clients. So yeah, that's about it for this week. I will throw it over to Josh for the marketing side, which I assume will be very interesting, especially with all of the sent and session token stuff going on right now. All right, thanks guys. Bye.
Hey everybody, it's Alex here. I'm going to be subbing in for Josh for the marketing section this week. So as I'm sure you can probably assume, it's been a big focus on Cent and the session network token transition so far in the last week. There's a lot of phases, so we're still doing internally some of the brand strategy as well as the brand visual stuff to really try and refine exactly how we want the new brand to look and how it's going to fit in line with session. Now, as some of you in the community have pointed out, Cent might not be a strong enough connection to session itself, and so we're exploring some options to try and make sure that the new token brand is going to be super closely aligned with session, because after all, that is one of the main points of the relaunch. So on that note, we've been doing a lot more community consultation. You would have seen us in those community channels talking to you and answering questions as often as possible. We also prepared to do an AMA. And so we understand that at the moment this is a bit of turbulent time. There's a lot that's changing. It is a period of evolution for the project. And so naturally, those of you who have been around for a long time and have a lot of attachment to the project have a lot of questions. So we set up an AMA with a survey where we got a lot of questions, and we also sent Wes and Tim through the community channels to just gauge what some of the commonly asked questions were and concerns that came up multiple times. So we collated all of that, and we actually recorded earlier today that video, so that should be out this week, which is really exciting, and I look forward to seeing how people react to the answers that we gave in that video, and I'm sure it's going to stoke a whole new wave of conversation and dialogue between the team and the community, which is really good, and we want to keep doing that. I'm also currently looking into some other ways to try and make sure that we keep those communication channels open as we do the transition, but we'll hear a little bit more about that down the line. And so outside of the refresh side of things, Wes and Tim have been holding it down on our regular socials channels to make sure that they stay updated and active as we continue to do all of this other bigger stuff in the background. And in big part of that was follow up for the recent config messages update, which had a 2-week delay between people actually updating and then the changes being in place. And so we had to do some more comms around that to make sure that people weren't caught off guard by those changes being enacted. We've also been keeping a bit of a pulse both through the help desk and socials on any issues that users might be running into, making sure that we're feeding that back to the devs so they can identify and debug any problems with that update. And last but not least, Wes and Cam did an audit of our Twitter performance in July. So that was cross-referencing both like the copy style of the posts as well as the actual content formats which were being used, and comparing that to some key user engagement metrics to see what kind of content is performing the best and reinforcing and validating the direction that we want to go with our socials down the line. So that's pretty much it for this week. Hopefully we'll have Josh back in the chair next week. But until then, see you guys soon.